So Foster Forsyth 2022, what is it? For those of you who participated in a previous meeting, this is going to be a bit of a repeat, but we want to make sure everybody's on the same page. The comprehensive plan is the county's guide for future growth and development. It is really a community-based vision. It's not based solely on technical information, although it's an important piece of it. It's really driven by community goals for the future from a growth standpoint. It is, from a practical standpoint, the county's guide for rezoning and future development decisions. So if the property next to you is going for a rezoning, the way that that process would get approved would be starting with the county staff, going through the planning commission, and then eventually to the board of commissioners, using this plan to determine if it aligns with this document. So that's one of the main goals or the main purposes of the plan. It also helps with other day-to-day decisions that the county is making around future growth and development. And lastly, it is required by the state. It does tie, if you do not maintain your plan, you are not eligible for certain grants and loans and other programs that the state and even the region runs. At the heart of the plan is the community character map. This is that piece that really guides those future rezoning decisions. The county is divided up into 11 character areas. We'll talk more about those later. There's also currently 3 nodes of activity where we see more concentrated uses and hubs of activity at regional, community, and neighborhood nodes. So again, this is the heart of the plan. We did want to highlight that this is not a major update to the plan. At the end of the day, if you looked at it and didn't pay a lot of close attention, you might think it's the same plan that was updated in 2017, but we are refining it. So for refinements around the edge, we are focused on making sure that we have updated priorities for the 5-year work program. So what are the key things we need to get input on, or we need to focus on over the next 5 years, and what are the actions that we're going to take on under them? We also have added a broadband element, and we're aligning the comprehensive plan with several other plans that the county has in place, and we'll talk a bit about those in a moment. It is important to highlight that the plan is a collaborative effort. We are working with a steering committee that includes 1 member of the county's board of commissioners. It also includes your economic development director for the county, and we have 1 appointed person from each board of commissioner district representing the citizens of the community. So they're helping keep us on track, making sure the plan is going the direction it should be going, and helping us make decisions based on the community input we're getting. And then lastly, y'all are the community as a really important part of the priorities we're focusing on and the changes that we're recommending. It's a balancing act, but all of these pieces are really critical. We do want to point out others that have a key role in the plan. Your board of commissioners are going to be asked to adopt the plan and implement the plan. We've talked to them at the beginning of the process. We also have your regional commission and the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. We have a 2-month period at the end of the process just for them to review it. It does go out to all the neighboring jurisdictions to make sure that the comprehensive plan is compatible with your neighbors, because we know planning or land use does not just end at the county boundaries. Things that happen in Dawson County affect what happens in Forsyth and vice versa. And so that's a really important part of the update process. We have broken up the planning process roughly into these 4 key stages, and we are in the planning phase. So we've, again, done some visioning and listening and data gathering, and now we're starting to put that into how the plan is going to be updated. In fact, coming out of the series of meetings, we will be putting a draft plan document together, and at the next set of meetings in May with the public, we'll present highlights from the plan. It will still be in draft format, but we anticipate at that point will pretty much be how the plan will move forward. This is the schedule. It looks like we're about halfway through, but because of that 2-month review period at the end, we're actually we're more like 2/3 of the way through with our process. We've again done the bulk coming out of these meetings of gathering community input, and next we're going into pulling the plan together. So I've already talked about several dates on here, but the goal is to adopt the plan in September. The county is required by the state to adopt it at latest in October 2022. So we do want to make sure everyone understood all the outreach that's been going on. We have an interactive website with an outreach list on it. If you haven't visited that, it's fosterforsyth2022.com. We carried out several interviews at the beginning of the planning process with community leaders. We mentioned the steering committee and the 3 rounds of input, as I highlighted earlier, and public hearings. Again, we're in this meeting series 2. This is our last live meeting, but we are opening up at 8 a.m. on Friday an online input period where if your neighbors or friends or other folks you think would like to have input to this plan, it's a really easy way for them to do it. Very simple instructions on the website on one page. Read this, watch this, provide input here, go to the next step. So that'll all be there for folks to participate online, and we'll be aggregating it with all the input we've collected at the live meetings. So I'm gonna pause. It looks like we may have a question or something in the chat. Oh, Caroline, thank you for posting. The website link is there if anyone would like to pull that up while we're talking. So the rest of the presentation really talking about implementation and what's directing us. So we talked about some of these things at the last round of meetings, but we're kind of taking it to the next level because now we have public input. So, we're looking at long-term vision and goals, which were set in your major update to your comp plan in 2017. We're not changing those. We're also the changes in trends and existing conditions related to growth and infrastructure, economic trends, things that are going on even with the pandemic, looking at those, that's directing kind of where we're going moving forward, as well as the community input, which I already alluded to. Here's the long-term vision statement that will stay in the comprehensive plan as is. A few keywords here: responsible use of our natural assets, balanced growth management strategy, and quality of life. Those are 3 of the key things that we're making sure that this update to the plan are staying consistent with. Is everything going back to this? Are we staying true to this vision that was set in the previous planning process? We're also guided by these 6 key goals. A lot of these goals are actually addressed by other planning efforts that the county already has in place. So they'll help implement some of these. And then there's also some that apply kind of more on the land use side of things. And so when we talk about actions a little later, they're organized under these goals. We also know that the population is growing. Forsyth is a very desirable place to live. You all have great schools. You've got great parks. There's a high quality of life. We know from a housing standpoint, and other factors are making people want to continue to live here. So we know that growth is coming from a population standpoint. If you're looking at the screen right now, you'll see in 2042, if we're looking out to a 20-year planning horizon, we have the population growing to around 377,000. That's based on recent trends over the last 3 years and some census statistics. If you look at other projections that have been done for the county coming out of Atlanta Regional Commission and your water and wastewater plans and your transportation plans, you have the projections for 20 years out being notably higher. So we know we're growing. We know we're growing significantly. To how much is a little bit up for debate. It's really a prediction more than an exact science. So we need to plan for where do we want these people to live? What kind of housing options do we want to have for them? I already spoke to aligning with other planning efforts. We did a lot of that when we got started with the existing plan. So you'll see some references as you go through the input tools to other initiatives that will implement some of our goals. Like we've heard a lot about mobility and reducing congestion. Well, your comprehensive transportation plan addresses that. And we've heard some about the need to grow jobs. And so the economic development strategic plan speaks to that. Speaking of economic development, that also is directing us because we know that the county is working to balance the tax base. And when we say that, what we mean is really making sure we have a balance of residential uses, housing, as well as commercial uses in the county. And part of the goal of that, there's several goals of that, make sure we have the services that our citizens need to have jobs closer to our homes, and also to make sure that the cost burden of all these great schools and parks sidewalks, other services that we love in the county are not all on taxpayers, the residential taxpayers, that they can be balanced with businesses as well and commercial uses. So we know that the county and the Chamber are working actively to attract these different sectors you're seeing on the screen. So we want to make sure that we've reserved space for them. And Lauren will talk a little bit about commercial corridors later and the tying into making space for these different types of employment opportunities we're looking to bring in. Another thing, of course, that we are doing is making sure that transportation and land use work together. So where we're seeing transportation investments, or we know that they're planned and we can expect to see some changes in land use. For example, if we're widening the road, we would expect to see likely if there's commercial zoning or an opportunity for commercial zoning to see more investment in it on those corridors. Similarly, with like a trails project, we know that trails are a very attractive feature and also drive investments such as new housing development or ancillary services that you might want near a trail network. Last bit of information I'm going to go through here in terms of what's guiding our implementation approach is community input that we've received. And as I spoke to earlier, we heard from community leaders at the beginning of the planning process. These are some of the things that we heard from more than one person. I already spoke to some of this indirectly, is the development and growth of our commercial corridors, again, reserving that space for businesses, for the employment sectors we want to attract, to make sure we have jobs for our citizens nearby, carving out land for industrial and office space, also looking at more using our live work play spaces to accommodate a diversifying community. If you were at the last series of meetings, we talked about how much Forsyth is diversifying and that we expect that trend to continue. Also leveraging some of your natural resources like Lake Lanier, the things that set you apart from other communities in the Atlanta metropolitan area. We also want to make sure we're implementing our transportation projects because they help maintain the quality of life and do many of the land use goals that we have. And then you'll see kind of at the bottom some of those quality of life things that we heard a lot about, furthering connectivity via sidewalks, bike lanes, and common gathering spaces. So having green space and parks and those sort of things as an integral part of Forsyth and what it's known for. What you're seeing right now is the input that we received through meeting series 1, including the online input period. It followed a very similar pattern to how we're carrying out this meeting, these series of meetings. We had just over 400 people participate in our online community survey. We had a mapping activity that we kind of have a version 2 of now. Just over 200 people participated in that. We had roughly about 50 people at the public meetings. It's looking like we're probably around that same amount with this meeting series as well. And then we had some other tools. So you're seeing on the right the areas where we heard from people. That map is showing that the darker areas are where we've heard from more people than others at this point. And this does not include the second round of meetings. So we'll update this map to show, as you can see, we've heard from a lot of people kind of around the lake and in the central portion of the county, but not necessarily in the northwest and northeast corners. The last set of meetings, we asked a lot about priorities for the next 5 years. So that's what you're seeing on the screen. And the purpose of that was to really help inform our community work program. All of the needs and opportunities that were identified as priorities have to have at least, this is the state planning rules, have to have at least one action associated with them in the community work program. The next 5 years of what are we going to do, and that could include small area studies, looking at zoning code changes, things that are related to growth and development. They really dictate the way that your elected officials push resources such as funding as well as help your planning staff determine how they spend their time beyond the day-to-day things that they have going on. And so these are some of the key things we heard. They are reflected in the input that we're asking for at this stage in the process. And I'll talk a little bit about an actions input form later, but it's all been informed by the input we got during the last round and the leadership input we collected earlier. So we wanted to make sure everyone's really clear on how these things are connected. We have some boards at the in-person meeting that people were able to look at, but we're kind of pulling this into this one slide. So again, we've got those goals that I pointed to earlier. We have 6 goals. We are organizing all of the priority needs and opportunities under goals. So they kind of flow under one of the 6 goals. And then for the needs and opportunities all have these actions that will feed into this 5-year work program. So we'll have a work program that identifies what are we going to do, how much is it going to cost, who's responsible for it, and there'll be a full table having thought through how we're going to execute on these things. And with that, I'll pause. I don't see any questions, so I'll let Lauren talk about land use for a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. So we have several slides and the goal is to show how the input that we received in that first round of meetings, both at the in-person meetings as well as the online virtual tools, fed into some of the proposed changes that we're looking at incorporating into the Foster Forsyth 2022 plan. So we asked about community scale. And the dots on the map represent responses that we heard both at the in-person meetings as well as online. We manually put dots down for the responses that we got at the in-person meetings onto the virtual activities. So, and then same thing with the balancing land uses. So for community scale, we asked folks about a range of development intensity, if you will, so natural being no development, rural being very low density, then suburban up through town center development, and each one of those scales is represented by a different colored dot on the map. And then balancing land uses, there were some specific uses that the county wanted us to ask about, and so we asked about appropriate locations for mixed use development, for apartments, townhomes, and condos, vehicle-related businesses such as car dealerships, auto body repair shops, and then also storage facilities, because those are very specific uses that the county needs direction on where they should go within these character areas. Next slide. So this, we use some heat mapping through Social Pinpoint, which is the platform that we use for the virtual engagement. And you can see the different concentration of the different colored dots related to community scale. And so the one on it goes from rural, natural, rural is the green, suburban in the yellow, and then red is the town center. So that would obviously mean more intense development. And this helps to see where there was a concentration of dots, if you will, for those various types of community scales. Next slide. So the community scale exercise helped us to identify a couple of proposed changes to the community character area boundaries. The first one, number 1, the Chestatee jotted down the character area. Some of the input that we received indicated that it makes sense to extend that boundary a little bit to the west of the area where it is now, so that some of the area there is already more of a natural rural feel, and so that actually reflects the Chestatee jotted down character area a little bit better than North Georgia 400. So that's one of the changes that you'll have an opportunity to provide your input on. And then the campground, again, extend that farther south into the Vickery Creek to reflect the more rural or natural feel of the campground character area. The commercial corridor policies are going to be another addition to the Foster Forsyth 2022 plan. And the commercial corridor areas are, they were designated by the Board of Commissioners towards the end of last year. And these are corridors within the county where leaders felt like commercial development should be prioritized to help to prop up that tax base a little bit more. And so it's important that we add some policies to this plan to help supplement some of the overlay districts and design guidelines that are already in existence for some of those corridors.